Aloha, this is David from the Earth Medicine Institute. I am here with my friend and inspiration, David Way. And David just offered up an amazing class on trauma informed Qigong, and it generated a bunch of ideas in my head. So I wanted to run some ideas by David and see what he thinks about them and get some of his feedback, counsel, and perspective. So, welcome, David.
Hey.
Oh my God. So, trauma and the human nervous system.
Mm.
And um, I, I was, as you were talking in the class, I was just thinking about a triangle of the mind, the body, and the hormones and neurotransmitters, and how each will affect the other. The mind can affect the neurotransmitters can affect the mind. We could say the psyche or the Shen. The psyche can affect the body can affect the mind, and then the body can affect the neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters and hormones can affect the body. I was thinking about that as sort of a useful way of of looking at those things, and you can approach it from many different directions. And it seems like what you're doing is a combination of the mind affecting the neurotransmitters and the body. Actually, you seem to be affecting the whole triangle.
Yeah. Uh, you know, we could speak to that as the three treasures, the heaven, human, and earth, Kendi Ren. Heaven, the Shen, the mind,
Uh
right?
huh.
The neurotransmitters, the chemistry aspect, that would be considered body and or human.
Uh
And
huh.
then the earth would be the physicality
Hmm.
of our being, right? So you have a heaven, human, earth in that range as well.
Hawaiians
Uh,
have the same thing. They say Kia Kuaka Aina Nakanaka is the heaven, earth, and the people. So,
mhm.
um, so yeah, I was really interested in what you were talking about. One of the things that I'm doing a class with Jenna Harrison on it's called Wild Wisdom. It's actually a class using we're finishing out that book finally after about 10 years of not finishing it out. But we do a lot of practices, and one of the things that we're working with is this locus and what I call locus and focus. Focus is what our eyes are focused on. There's both a hard focus and a soft focus. But then there's also our locus, like where we identify within our body, where our center of identity is. Do you have any practices that are similar to that? Any Taoist practices you're aware of in terms of where you bring your attention?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Quite frankly, any of our movements lend to that kind of body awareness, um, especially these movements where they're quite simple in nature, but we do them for prolonged periods of time. Standing meditation, for example, circling the waist, for example, cloud hands, for example.
Mm.
Uh, any one of these kind of slow, repetitive movements that just lends to long durations of practice, um, give you an opportunity to focus on your body in different ways. So, for example, circling the waist, right? If I'm circling the waist, I can get bored of just circling my waist quite quickly. But if I'm feeling how my weight rolls and shifts along the bottoms of my feet, if I'm feeling how my ankle pivots
Mm.
in the heel, if I'm feeling how my knees stay soft amidst the range, or my hips, traverse this circle relative to the circle in my feet, or my belly, how it pushes forward and tucks back, or my waist, or my chest, or my shoulder, or my neck, or my jaw, or my temple, or my crown. At any point of reference, I can experience circling my waist. And in that regard, it's almost like I can take on the childish activity of exploration and play. Right. When I was a kid, I loved to explore the creek. I'd love to explore and venture into new things and experiment with things. But as we get older, we kind of find our grooves and experiment less. Right. But within these movements, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. So it allows room, a safe space to explore again. What does it mean to do this from my feet? What does it mean to do this from my right ear? What does it mean to do this from my left knee?
Exactly.
Still the same.
That's locus. That's interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. You said something in class about when we're in our body, we're not, the Shen settles or something when we're
Mm.
interoceptive, when we're aware of the sensations in our body, something happens to the mind. Would you say that again?
Yeah. I can't remember the way I said it. I was kind of in flow,
Trust
but I
me.
know what you're speaking
Good.
of.
Yeah.
So it's common. My teacher would refer to this as the monkey mind. It's a very common analogy for the racing mind that jumps from idea to thought to thought to thought, right? From branch to limb to limb, right? So we call it the monkey mind. Very hard to contain, very hard to tame, very hard to settle, right? The monkey is very active. And it's almost as if the more we try to control it, the harder it becomes, the more the mind races and wanders. And so my teacher would say, don't try to control the monkey. Just give it a banana. And, and the monkey will chill on its own and enjoy the banana. And so he would liken the banana to body experience.
That's
And
fantastic.
so we would do movements where we'd clap or we'd pat on our body or we'd, circle our waist to bring that back into the conversation. And then when you're done, be still and feel the leftover residual sensation, the leftover tactile stimulus that's in your sensory nervous system. What do you feel? Nothing make believe, nothing imaginary or fairy. Mystical experiences are available, but you really want us to be grounded in the physicality of our being.
In the
And
interoception.
oftentimes, when you feel this and feel that and feel that, your head just naturally shuts up.
It's true. There's a Tibetan practice called Shenpa. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and it's used specifically for when we're triggered. I use it all the time, and so adrenaline, Mr. Liver, right? Adrenaline is so adrenaline is my canary in the coal mine. The minute I feel that adrenaline rush, I go, okay, time to pay attention. That's my cue. If I'm triggered, and if I'm not physically threatened, obviously, but I'm triggered. And so, Shenpa is the thing in our the thing that makes our thoughts sticky. So I'll get angry about something, and I'll think about something else that makes me angry, and then something else, and then I'm down that rabbit hole, right? That Shenpa is what does that. So the practice of Shenpa is treating all of my emotions as value neutral sensations. So I'm triggered. Okay, what's that feel like in my body? And I just stay present, and then it slowly morphs, and then it doesn't follow down. It doesn't go down the rabbit hole. It's like a pattern interrupt, and that sounds like exactly what you were talking, like what your teacher was talking about. That
Mm-hmm.
that practice. Um, you were also talking about the Chung vessel and the endocrine system, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I do Zuling Chi, gallbladder 41 on a lot of my patients as a way to connect with ancestors, with their epigenetics. So I thought that
Mm-hmm.
was really interesting. I'd never heard that reference before as the endocrine system also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that thrusting meridian, it's not your do that goes up the back. It's not your ren along the front. It's
Right,
up through
right,
your middle.
straight up, yeah.
And, you know, it's just in relation to what's there. Your reproductive organs, your appendix, your pancreas, your adrenals, your thymus, thyroid, parathyroid, pineal, pituitary. They're
Um,
all along the central
exactly,
channel.
yeah, 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 yeah.
The relationship is natural. It's also further related to the chakra system, right? How different chakras are related to
Oh
different.
yeah, right, exactly, exactly. Um, speaking of the small heavenly circuit, the microcosmic orbit, the other one, have you ever heard that you're not supposed to do that lying down? Has it ever come across your radar?
No.
Okay, good. Because somebody said that to me once, and I was like, and I've been doing it and teaching it and doing it with lovers and stuff for like since the Qing dynasty, right? So I'm like, I mean, I've been blowing this, like, oh, am I damaging something? You know, like, um, something else I was noticing was,
Can I speak to that really quick though?
oh, please,
Microcosmic
absolutely,
orbit.
yeah, interrupt me
Yeah.
anytime. No,
I've never heard of it um, being bad to do lying down. Um, the way that microcosmic orbit was transmitted to me is that it's nothing special. The idea is that everyone's microcosmic orbit is open. If it
okay.
wasn't, we'd be dead, we'd be paralyzed, we'd be something.
We wouldn't conceive, or we wouldn't be able.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
something's off, right? And so by and large, most of us are healthy and able bodied. The microcosmic orbit is open, maybe not optimal,
Right.
but it's open. And then, so any of these conversations of visualizing or feeling or forcing a flow, um, you know, that could be the detriment. You know, and that could be whether you're seated, lying, standing, flying, swimming, whatever. If you're forcing a flow with your thought, my teacher would call that running a dry circuit, and
Oh,
of you
interesting.
run the risk of short circuiting or blowing a fuse, so to
Got it. I
speak.
actually had that happen to me. I'll take it to you offline sometime. But yeah, yeah, interesting.
So the other thought to that is it's less about thinking the circuit and more about feeling. And what I mean by that in distinction is, so there's a fluid that goes with the fire. If your thought is the fire, right, running the dry circuit, then you also need a ground. You need a fluid to complement it. You need a yin to complement the yang. And so that fluid then is cerebral spinal fluid
Right,
and endocrine
right.
that go up. And then the down is your metabolic fluids of your saliva swallowing down and your food and beverage going down. And so you have this cycle of literal substance, cerebral spinal fluid and endocrine rising, and then salivary and metabolic descending. And that process is facilitated by pressurized breath. And so by closing off my lower gate, my mula bandha, if you will, right, I can pressurize the lower abdomen with deep abdominal breathing. And that's going to squeeze like toothpaste through a tube. It's going to push my endocrine fluids up. It's going to push my cerebral spinal fluid up. And then I'm going to swallow on my exhale and feel the metabolic pathway go down. And so I have this real physical fluid that's traversing this path, distinct from, oh, visualize it, oh, see light colors, oh,
Oh yeah,
spiral at this
yeah,
point and that point,
exactly. No, no, I
right?
get it. Yeah, I totally get it. I'm always making shit up. That's kind of what I do. And the the so I always kind of put in my own sort of hallucination. I put you going into sort of three arenas. There's structure, hydraulic, and energetics. Structure is posture, and hydraulics is just what you were talking about. It's not about visualizing, it's about using it. You're pumping fluid essentially. And then
Yeah.
the combination of the two makes for, I mean, this is totally uninformed opinion, but this is what I've been doing and think the way I think about it. Okay, that answers my question. That's great. Yeah, so I'm on the right track, sort of, for a white guy. Really, for a gaijin. Um, Something else you were talking about when we were talking about the vocalization. You were talking about staying in a parasympathetic state and how important that is to heal. The
Mhm.
vagus nerve going from the from the the 10th cranial nerve down to the vocal cords, the heart, the digestion, and parts of the reproductive organs. I've always suspected that those tones back stimulate the vagus nerve and get you to relax more. You know.
Absolutely. Yeah, because as you said, the nerve runs the full course. And so the tone isn't just coming from our vocal box. Like as we did in the class, we toned certain parts of our body. And the idea there is, finding your resonance, your individual unique resonance. We may all be different guitars, but hey, I'm a cello, you're an ukulele. And so we're going to sound different.
Right.
And in that regard, you know, oftentimes the transmission of 6 healing sounds or healing tones, for example, it's like, this is the sound, do it like this. You're toning yourself to who knows who made these sounds originally or what their body constitution, what their, condition or whatever is. And so it is of value to find your individual resonance. And so to play with pitches, play with tones. And I hear you on, stimulating the vagus nerve to access that parasympathetic space, but also in the conversation of somatics, the
Exactly.
science of sound and matter.
Right.
And so if you're trying to mimic someone else's sound, you're deconstructing your own, right? Because as much as sound can shape matter, it can also destruct matter too. And
And
so
you're
if
not
you're making sound,
body. Yeah. You're not
yeah,
being
yeah.
with
So you
your.
want to find sounds that are appropriate for your body so that you can bring healing and shape to your body.
And that toning also releases nitric oxide in the sinuses. It actually releases it. I don't know if it goes to the brainstem or not, but it's really good for you. So that's very cool. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
This is fun.
oh yeah, I love this stuff. You know, you were. I loved what you said about your teacher said about posture is praying.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is prayer because I always say that my Hawaiian teachers prayed with their bodies when they were gathering herbs. There's something grounded, relaxed, not pretentious, not self-conscious, just like, but they're fully present and you can feel it. That's a really interesting thing.
Mm. Yeah, I hear a similar conversation in um, asana practice. There's a lot of like spiritual yogis and yoginis that will speak to asana as prayer. And so you're like aligning yourself to the sacred geometry of the cosmos. I also hear it in like modern dance or like interpretive dance communities where they're letting the spirit express, and so that's a type of prayer. Um, in our work, we look at holding integrity, the structural alignment of my body, with humility, the relaxation of my body, with sincerity, the connectivity of my body, not only to myself, but to others in my environment, right? So humility, integrity, humility, sincerity, show up, shut up, add value. Uh, all of those can be considered spiritual in nature. And so to hold yourself present to those attributes as you practice, as you stand, as you sit, as you eat, as you defecate, everything then becomes an opportunity to celebrate and witness divine.
Yeah, and what I really like what the way because you can do yoga or one can do yoga and as an athletic endeavor or to be a pretzel or to show off or whatever, or to show how buff one is, but I love your approach in that there's a certain posture that's appropriate, but within that, you find your way. And it's not about looking good necessarily. It's about tuning into getting feedback from our bodies about what truth is. That can be
Absolutely.
praying. Yeah, praying with the body.
Yeah, and that's really important, especially in our practice, because I'm a big guy. You know me well. Some of our watchers know me too. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'5", I'm about 300 some pounds. I'm huge. And my teacher is a fraction of my height and weight. And he's very, very agile and very, very mobile. And I'm pretty agile and mobile for my size. But if I were to try to move like him, it would be detriment to me. By the same token, he's my master. But if he tried to do stuff like me, it'd be detriment to him.
Yeah.
And so it's not about do it like the master does it, because then now I'm just a martial historian. I'm a martial scientist. This is the way it's done.
Yeah.
But we're martial artists, and we want to have room to express ourselves and be creative and explore what's possible for us within these shapes. And so in that regard, a form of 5 animal or whatever, a Tai Chi set, this is the way that our lineage does it. But this person does it different from that person, does it different from that person, does it different from that person. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's celebrated versus, oh, it needs to be just right, or you don't get your belt, or you can't advance, or you can't, whatever,
Yeah. The world says
then we're not our.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. I wanted to talk a little bit about trauma, and I wanted to talk. We were talking earlier off camera about social media and stuff, and how it's race to the bottom of the brainstem and the whole algorithm thing, and we're just like it's fracturing us, and we're all in this, like you say, this echo chamber where it's this sort of like social narcissism where we just think everybody thinks like us. So I really like and appreciate your approach to trauma. And I also really see the opposite view, personally. And so I wanted to talk about, because I mean, there's tremendous benefit in what you're doing, and I also see, I've done, Mankind Project and things like that, which are very sort of, if they're taken to an extreme, they're sort of self-indulgent and narcissistic. So there are different ways of approaching trauma. And I really see the value in what you're doing, but I also I've experienced the value in what in my own life and with people that I've worked with, because I do a lot of work with trauma, and we also teach self-defense to a lot of women who've been traumatized, and we have very specific things that we do that actually are more. I don't know. They're actually more kind of like what you're doing, but we recreate a high adrenaline state because trauma is created in a high adrenaline state, and then we give the body a different outcome. So it's considered a real no-no in the psychological community because we do what they call flooding technique. But because we do it in sacred space or held space, and it's a very controlled environment, and there's a lot of women there at the same time, social reinforcement, it works. It works really well. Um, So I just wanted to explore your thoughts, your thoughts about the possibility that emotional work might be useful, or cognitive therapy, or things like that from you. Because I know you were being sort of tongue in cheek, adamant about shut up and do your practice. Don't whine.
Yeah. Um, there's a couple ways to view it. Um, First off, shut up, don't whine works for me
That
as an athletic martial artist male who's 6'5" and probably doesn't have as much threat or has to deal with as much threat as others. Whereas perhaps someone that arises a different body type, body constitution, uh,
or
different
just being a
character
woman.
profile,
Yeah.
um, you know, different therapy works for different people. By and large, I really stick to my guns without with not talking about it, because I believe that the more we talk about it, the more we reinforce it.
Right.
And so, absolutely, talk therapy, emotional therapy is, those work. However, there's cases where they don't,
A lot.
and
Yeah.
by the same token, this stuff works, and there's cases where it doesn't. And so it's never going to be black and white. It's always going to be case by case.
Mhm.
And it's kind of the beauty of having choice and having a variety of options, because we can explore. And that's part of the path of self-discovery and spiritual evolution, is kind of finding ways that work for your spirit.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking, one of the things I like about the shaking too is in in traumatic situations, where you've got this adrenaline dump and then a cortisol dump right after that. Apparently, one of the things that causes PTSD is immobility.
Mm,
So in a high adrenaline situation, if somebody's immobilized in some way, if they're in their freeze response, which is also a natural response, but that is what creates PTSD. So
interesting.
taking that and there's probably a genetic component to it also, but then doing that shaking and I have like a Zaz machine here, a vibrating machine, that, yeah, I love
Great.
those things. They're awesome. But yeah, I can see where that would directly address that in the nervous system, right?
Hmm.
And in the brainstem and stuff.
Yeah. I've come across similar information in my studies, where fear and excitement are the exact same hormone, except one you're immobile and not breathing, where the other one you're hypermobile and breathing.
That's
And so,
fantastic. Really?
but otherwise, biochemically, it's the same. And so, if you find yourself in fear, you're probably stuck. And so, move and breathe. Right. And if you find yourself in excitement, just enjoy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And there was a study done of the reframe of fear to excitement with stage fright. And they found that when it's reframed, that the cortisol levels don't go up, which
Mm,
makes sense. So in a traumatic situation, you get this 4 to 5 second dump of adrenaline, and then it disappears, and the rest is cortisol. It's all,
mm,
and cortisol's job is to keep the glucose away from the everything else, like you said in class, and just go to the muscles. So you don't worry about your toe fungus or reproduction or anything. It's like just get away. So that would make sense. And if you reframe it as excitement, that would drop those cortisol levels. But you still have enough to get you like excited about what you're doing. But yeah, that's interesting. I bet the cortex puts it into it takes it down a notch from just paralyzing fear to, oh, I got this. I can do this. This is fuel for my response. That's very cool.
mm.
Did you have experience with people who'd been, besides yourself, who'd been traumatized in China? Was there people that came through the monastery who were trying to work with their trauma?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a very special person to want to give up their worldly affairs to travel to some mountain in China and be with monks. By and large, you get a lot of people that want to improve themselves and optimize their health, but you also get a big portion of people that are escaping shit.
Wow.
And, you got to think the nature of the temple throughout history, you know, it was also political refuge. Like, people are escaping from their circumstance. And so they go to the temple as a safe haven throughout time. And so, uh, yeah, we get it a lot. And how much they wear on their sleeve is relative to the person. But by and large, most of us were coping with something when we go to that temple. Because otherwise, what would be the initiative to go?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I hadn't thought of that. Oh. What I'm trying to do is I'm in the process of upgrading our self-defense classes, and I'm doing a lot of
Hmm.
researching, and I'm experimenting with herbs and with ways to get glucose to the hippocampus and all this stuff. optimize the work that we're doing. So
Mm.
um, I was just wondering if you had seen people who'd been through trauma and come through it through specific kinds of practices, or was it always individual?
There was. It's something I would like to review my notes for, but we did get transmission relative to trauma, because not all trauma is same. Some people are victims of violence. Some people are victims of aggression. Some people are victims of isolation. Some people are
Yeah.
victims of, whatever the circumstance may be.
Hmm.
And so, relative to how you were traumatized would determine how you heal. It's almost like a restorative justice type deal, where instead of going to jail for armed robbery, you have to go volunteer and soothe the victims of armed robbery, right? And
Yeah.
so it's almost as if you would go and remedy the pain that you cause. And so, likened to the best person to help you break your heroin addiction is a recovering heroin addict. The best person to break you free from your alcoholism is someone who's broken free of alcoholism. And so, it's almost like you, having been there, you can help others through it. And in that regard, there is a specific type of healing available relative to your experience.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to, maybe another conversation we can talk about that. I'd love to hear about those different approaches, you know. It reminds me of I don't know if you're familiar with Chiron, I think it's Greek who's
The medium,
what?
the trance medium, Chiron,
No, Chiron is
where
is
people are like,
no, Chiron was a Greek god. He was actually it was immortal. He was half horse, half man, and he was immortal, but he was hit with he would get these he was hit with this poison arrow, I think, and he would get these diseases, but because he couldn't die, he just suffered perpetually. And he traveled the world meeting healers and studying healing with them to see if he could heal his pain. And he finally came to the conclusion that the only time his pain diminished was when he was helping others, he was healing others. So he went and he would gather all these healing techniques and then use them on other people, and then his own pain would diminish, you know. So that's kind of a bodhisattva thing, you know.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And that bodhisattva thing, as noble as it is, so easily turns into a complex
Oh,
too.
yeah. Virtue signaling. Well, well, one thing I've learned in my life is I don't want to believe my own press releases. That's for damn sure. You know, I'm fucked. You know, it's like, uh,
Right on.
oh man. Well, this has been great, brother. Any final thoughts on any of the stuff that was banging around?
It's all good. It's always a joy to work with you. We're going on close to a decade now of brotherhood and friendship,
Yeah, yeah.
and overjoyed to build alongside you. And thank you for keeping me involved in your projects. And I would
Yeah.
love to contribute more. And I look
Let's
forward to
talk about
spending more
that. We'll
time with
put something together with that, you know. Maybe we can do a workaround we were talking about earlier, you know, with um, with live classes or recordings or something, you know. But
you. Yeah,
and I'd love to have you out here.
right on. Yeah. Baby's almost due, so I'll be tied down for the next 3 to 6 months once baby pops. But then after that, we're going to be exploring our move to Hawaii. Just the
That's
other night,
awesome.
my wife was like, "We need to go. We need to go. I don't want to be there."
If you know,
So
if you need connections and on Oahu, let me know. I've got you have tons there. You went to school there, so you know lots of people. But anyway, yeah, I'm actually going over at the end of the month. I'm doing some work with Bishop Museum and ancient Hawaiian plant remedies, so I'm really excited. Yeah, we're getting these old records from Bishop Museum, and we're figuring out what the really old Hawaiian herbal formulas were. So
mm,
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
you're doing great.
All right, man. Give my love to your better half, huh? Thanks so much.